it was a temptation to yield to that pull. The more he fought it, the more he was exhausted. At last the Terran turned on his back, trying to float with the stream, sure he could no longer battle it. Luckily, those few inches of space above the surface of the water continued, and he had air to breathe. But the fear of that ending, of being swept under the surface, chewed at his nerves, and his bodily danger burned away the last of the spell which had held him, brought him into this place, wherever it might be. Was it only his heightened imagination, or had the current grown swifter? Shann tried to gauge the speed of his passage by the way the patches of green light slipped by. Now he turned and began to swim slowly, feeling as if his arms were leaden weights, his ribs a cage to bind his aching lungs. Another patch of light, larger, spreading across the roof overhead. Then he was out of the tunnel into a cavern so vast that its arching roof was like a sky dome far above his head. But here the patches of light were brighter, and they were arranged in odd groups which had a familiar look to them. Only, better than freedom overhead, there was a shore not too distant. Shann swam for that haven, summoning up the last rags of his strength, knowing that if he could not reach it very soon, he was finished. Somehow he made it, and lay gasping, his cheek resting on sand finer than any of the outer world, his fingers digging into it for purchase to drag his body on. But when he collapsed, his legs were still awash in water. No footfall could be heard on that sand, but he knew that he was no longer alone. He braced his hands and with painful effort levered up his body. Somehow he made it to his knees, but he could not stand. Instead, he half tumbled back so that he faced them from a sitting position. Them? There were three of them. The dragon-headed ones with their slender, jewel-set bodies glittering even in this subdued light. Their yellow eyes fastened on him with a remoteness which did not approach any human emotion, save perhaps that of a cold and limited wonder. But behind them came a fourth, one he knew by the patterns on her body. Shann clasped his hands about his knees to stop the trembling of his body, and eyed them back with all the defiance he could muster. Nor did he doubt that he had been brought here, his body as captive to their will as had been that of their spy or messenger in his crude snare on the island. "Well, you have me," he said hoarsely. "Now what?" His words boomed weirdly out over the water, were echoed from the dim outer reaches of the cavern. There was no answer. They merely stood watching him. Shann stiffened, determined to hold to his defiance and to that identity which he now knew was his weapon against the powers they used. The one who had somehow drawn him there moved at last, circling around the other three with a suggestion of diffidence in her manner. Shann jerked back his head as her hand stretched to touch his face, and then, guessing that she sought her peculiar form of communication, he submitted to her fingertips, though now his skin crawled under that light but firm pressure, and he shrank from the contact. There were no sensations this time. To his amazement, a concrete inquiry shaped itself in his brain, as clear as if the question had been asked aloud. "Who are you?" "Shann," he began vocally, and then turned words into thoughts. "Shann Lantee, Terran, man." He made his answer the same which had kept him from succumbing to their complete domination. "Name, Shann Lantee, man, yes." The others accepted those. "Terran?" That was a question. Did these people have any notion of space travel? Could they understand the concept of another world holding intelligent beings? "I come from another world." He tried to make a clear-cut picture in his mind. a globe in space, a ship blasting free. Look, the finger still rested between his eyebrows, but with her other hand the Warlockian was pointing up to the dome of the cavern. Shann followed her order. He studied those patches of light which had seemed so vaguely familiar at his first sighting, studying them closely to know them for what they were. A star map. A map of the heavens as they could be seen from the outer crust of Warlock. Yes, I come from the stars, he answered, booming with his voice. The fingers dropped from his forehead. The scaled head swung around to exchange glances, which were perhaps some unheard communication with the other three. Then the hand was extended again. Come. Fingers fell from his head to his right wrist, closing there with surprising strength. And some of that strength together with a new energy flowed from them into him, so that he found and kept his feet as the other drew him up. This concludes the reading of Chapter 11.